Welcome to the Libertarian Institute podcast. Today, I am joined by Rachael Nelson, our social media director. We are halfway to our fundraising goal for the 2025 year. If you are interested in any of the work that we put out, please check out libertarianinstitute.org. Check out our search engine. We have articles, blogs, podcasts, videos, and audio only podcasts. So if you're interested in seeing through the propaganda that we so often see given to us by the corporate press and academics, please check out libertarianinstitute.org. Rachael Nelson, thank you for your time.
Oh, yeah, I'm excited. When we talked about doing this last week, I was ready. I was thinking about what I wanted to do and talk to you about. I'm excited.
Well, we've worked together for a while, and I still have no clue how you came across the concept of libertarianism in a world that, can I ask how old you are?
I'm 34.
Okay. So we're pretty close in age, but I'm wondering, how were you able to escape, whether it was the feminist indoctrination? I had the social justice, anti-American indoctrination. How'd you come across this worldview?
So I was raised in the Republican Party. My stepdad was Air Force, so I voted red. That was not a question. If you wanted money in the family, you voted red. You didn't ask, so you just did that. And in high school, I actually ran the Bush, like inner school, try to vote for whatever, not anything too professional, not 18 or anything, so didn't actually vote, but I did the George W. Bush one, which now is kind of embarrassing because he's such a great president. But I still did that because it was something that interested me and I felt like I needed to do something. It was important to me. And after that, I kind of stopped really doing much in the politics game. I started working, I had kids, and then
Okay.
COVID hit.
Okay. I want to ask questions throughout this. So
Of
if
course.
I had gone back to 18-year-old Rachel Nelson and said, "Why do you like President Bush? Why are you supporting him?" What would you say at that time?
So for me, 9/11 hit me pretty hard. I was fairly young when 9/11 happened. Obviously, we were about similar ages. So I was in sixth grade, and I thought the fact that he put the safety, in my opinion, now then, the
Mhm.
safety first of our nation, they came towards us. So he was going to go back and, show them the American force. And I like the fact that he seemed to just be a good old American boy who was going to stand for us as a cowboy should. And I think I was telling you the other night about the hot mic moments where he made comments over hot mics that just seemed like just a guy you could sit down and have a beer with. So for me, he seemed like a guy who had been forced into a really crappy situation with 9/11 and he was going to come out swinging for the American people. Now I look back and I'm like, that is not exactly at all correct. But 18-year-old me felt that way.
So for people who might think that that's funny or ridiculous to think that he kept us safe, biggest terrorist attack took place under his watch, how could anyone think that? I remember watching the Jay Leno show during it had to have been during the Bush administration. It might have been under Obama, but Jay Leno had Rush Limbaugh on and he goes, President Bush, you think he was a good president? And I remember I was at my dad's house at the time, and Rush Limbaugh said, well, he kept us safe. That was the very first thing he said, and I was so shocked. I go, "Well, Limbaugh," I'm like, "I swear to God that wasn't under Clinton. September 11th, that would have been in 2001." It was such a pause moment for me. So it really hit me years later when Jeb Bush is debating Donald Trump and Trump takes a shot at Bush Jr. and Jeb Bush says, "Say what you want about my brother. He kept us safe." And Trump goes, "Yeah, 9/11 happened under your brother." And Jeb Bush could not believe that he said that. And I go, okay, so I'm not crazy. I'm like, wait, there's got to be a huge response to this. He wouldn't have said something so ridiculous. At least
Yeah.
the flat earthers, when they say, the earth is flat, at least they have 2 bullet points ready to go because
Yeah.
they know that everyone thinks it's ridiculous. But let me explain. Surely Jeb Bush, with all the access to money, he has access to the internet, he'll have something. He did not respond to that at all. So just to let people know, this is actually a mainstream neocon opinion.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things, and like I said, I was raised Republican, my stepdad, and the first time I moved, our first deployment was to move where I was in Colorado to Washington State. which leads into where I became a libertarian living up there. And my first interaction living on base was 2 weeks before September 11th. I had just moved into base, so that morning I was getting ready to go to school when I got knocked on the door by an MP in full gear, and he was like, "You can't leave base. You can't go anywhere. Everything shut down." So in my eyes, it was like everything was crashing around me, and he came through as this like hero of the moment. So now I feel gross, like it makes me like gag a little bit, but that's what I felt and strongly about then. So he kind of was my beginning politics entrance.
And when you say it makes you feel gross, I've thought the same thing, but I'm wondering what your reasoning is. Why do you explain it like that?
Well, now looking back and learning a lot about, thanks to you and Scott, actually, I've learned a lot more about what he was doing as a president in a actual political way, like his economics, the way he was treating our troops, the way he actually handled the war, the evidence that started coming out, and how he doubled down on, well, this is for our protection, even though it became very clear that there was very little to minimal threat for actual American people on our soil. My stepdad served a couple tours, and then people that watched 9/11 with me continued to serve tours in a war that continued, that didn't seem that we had any reason to be there. I had friends who died over there. For me, it became very obvious that this war was not created for our safety. It was a continuation of something that had been happening, and now it was a revenue stream. And another thing to point out continuously for the Republican Party as, well, this is important because remember 9/11, even though at this point that was so long ago, it's still brought up as we have to keep remembering this could happen again. We have to keep eyes on this area when we really have no business over there at all anymore. We didn't really then either.
Yeah, there is a gross feeling when you feel like the good intentions you had were actively manipulated. I'm so
Yeah.
pissed off about all the doctors who sold me on the food pyramid that it's hard to go
Yeah.
back and remember how pissed off I was about being lied to about 9/11. But I'm sure if I could set the food pyramid doctors and academics aside, I would feel the same exact way. Have you, when you were growing up, after you were coming across this evidence, did you ever bring it up to your dad or any friends in the military? How did they respond?
So my stepfather was always, you do not question the commander in chief. So when the changeover happened from Bush to Obama to, I mean, it's always just been, you do not question the commander in chief. I signed on that dotted line. That is what I have given myself to my country, and he is in charge. Period. Um, some of my friends who are in the military now, I have one who served, was medically discharged, and he's got a very different opinion than one of my other friends who's still in and is continuing up the ranks. They both joined because of 9/11. That would be what they
Yeah.
believe is why they joined. They wanted to protect their family and friends, and that's, where they came from. They both are pretty disillusioned with that now. They One of them left medically discharged, so that was not necessarily his choice, but he said he probably would not have reenlisted. The other gentleman stayed because he has a child who needs that medical care. And so he feels very trapped now in the ability that he doesn't know what he would take out and move into civilian life. And his son needs that medical that's provided by that lovely little incentive to sign your life over. So they're both a little disillusioned at this point. One of them is still being deployed into different areas overseas, not that specific, but just all over, because people don't realize how many places we deploy our men to on a regular basis that we don't even know why we're there a lot of the time. Um, so they're disillusioned by all of it, to be honest. They're not like super gung ho anymore.
That's kind of what I'm getting when I talk to a lot of soldiers. It's really hard for them to state the mission, the overall objective, with the exception of something like, well, I'm doing this for the country. I'm like, oh gosh, really? We give them something like $1 trillion, say it's $500 billion a year on the Department of Offense. You would think that they'd at least have a few more conversations. Hey, if any of the taxpayers who fund us ask you what we're doing, here's what you should say. It's like they don't even care to have 3 solid bullet points to at least try and persuade us. It seems so weak at this point. Did anyone, approach you with hostility for questioning the war?
Um, Not until recently, not until I started doing it more publicly, like with the Institute and in my other type of work, not really. I was pretty under the radar. I was pretty quiet. I did a lot of science research. I did religious studies and ancient civilizations. And so I kind of stayed in the books. Um, it wasn't until we moved from Washington to Nebraska that I felt like I had to do something because I felt chased out of my kids' home. Like, I grew up in Colorado and then went to Washington, but I had planned to just stay there. I'd bought my forever home. We had started settling in, and then everything in Washington went to absolute shit. Like, there's no other way to put it. It just blew up. And when we made the choice to move to Nebraska is when I decided to get more vocal publicly. And that's when the hostility has started. Like, a lot of the you need to respect our servicemen and women without question. It's like, I do. I respect what they give for us. I understand what they go through. I have a lot of friends who are Marines. I have a lot of friends who are in the Air Force. I love and respect what they've put on the line and the stuff they've done. I don't think it's fair what they're put through, and I think that they don't fully understand when they join what they possibly are going to have to see, do, and stand for. And I agree, they should have some sort of, even when you're enlisting, some sort of explanation as to what your main mission is. Because I feel like a lot of times it's, protect your country, which is great, but from what and to what degree, and what happens when it's not being protected correctly.
Yeah, there is some sort of like some level of thought that I think has to take place. You have to bear some cost in order to prove that you're defending the country, you love the country. Like if I said, I really care about sick people, and that's why I like to go home and send out positive vibes to all the sick people because I care about them. It's like, okay. I don't think you're actively lying, but you're also not bearing even the slightest cost to actually help them. If I said, yeah, I'm basically like a doctor who, fixes broken arms, I just send positive vibes. That's how I do it. I'm sorry, we have to be willing to say that's not good enough. Certainly, they would recognize if I said, I totally support the government and the military, but I refuse to pay taxes. They wouldn't say, well, if that's how you like to show your support, then that's how you feel. They go, no, you have to prove it
Have
by
to.
sending us this money. If it's not here by April 15th, you are risking going to prison. We will put you there if you don't fund us. It's like, oh, so you like to have very high standards for me. Is it okay if I have reciprocal standards? I mean, apparently, according to you people, you're my employee. You are the
Right?
public servant, and I'm the taxpayer. So I should maybe not actively get to boss you around all the time, but what if I ask for a little something like, I'm not totally sold on this operation in Syria to arm the moderate rebels. I'm just going to opt out of that one. Surely you'll respect that, right? I don't love sending Zelensky even more money. I already gave him some. I don't like what he did with it. I want him to negotiate. I don't want to send any more. They're not going to be totally tolerant of that at all. So it is unfortunate the sense of entitlement that comes along with becoming a government employee. The concept of, I am totally owed this. These taxpayers have an obligation to me. I don't have any obligation to them. I don't even have to explain what we're doing over there. As a matter of fact, it's classified for your own safety. So I'm not going to
Classified.
tell you about it. We get to spy on you anytime we want. The NSA gets to, but you should really feel hostility even to ask us a question about what's going on over there. Unfortunately, that is just so discouraging. What would you say has been the most productive interaction that you've had with someone either in the military or in your personal life just to get them to see things a little more clearly?
So, one of my best friends that I've been friends with since 7th grade, so we've known each other, we were in band together. He joined the military, he went into service, he's been all over the place, he's still there. And I went back home and I said, "Let's get together." And a lot of, obviously, I work for the institute and I am the chair of the LP in Nebraska, so I have a different name necessarily to what he's doing in the political world. And when we got together, one of the first things I said is, we need to turn our phones off, leave them in our car when we go into lunch. I said, it may seem silly, but at this point, we want to be able to talk to each other without any of that crap. And we both know that if something were to happen, our phones will be pulled. And I don't need either one of us on the hook. And when he looked at me kind of surprised, I said, just humor me. We put him in the car, we went in and we discussed why. And by the end of lunch, he was like, I didn't realize how concerned a lot of the American people are with what's going on to that degree, because they do take it on faith. You just take it on faith, on trust. You put them there because we elected them there, right? So now we just have to shut up and trust them. And it's like, no, wait a minute. Do you know what the pulse of the people is? People are scared. People are nervous about what you're finding. And so I kind of gave him that. And by the end, he kind of sat back and thought, a lot of the servicemen and women probably don't understand to the degree at which we feel lied to, betrayed. And I think it also is betraying to them, because they really do believe, most of them, most of them, I think, really do believe they're here for our protection and to help their country. I don't think anyone would be willing to go through what they do for something they didn't really love. So I think they do love this country, and I respect that. I think they're being used and abused just as much as we're being lied to in many cases. And I think by the end, he kind of saw what I was saying. And now we've talked more about it in safer environments. And we always do take the precautions to have the conversations without our phones too close, without other mixed company, because we want to be able to trust and talk to each other about stuff. And it's sad to have
Yeah.
to be that way, but it works better.
So you were a libertarian before meeting your husband?
No. So he
No?
was a libertarian before I met him. Um, and then when we met, he was libertarian and I was iffy. I didn't really know. I was still kind of voting red because that's what I thought my that I hadn't done a lot of research. That was what I was supposed to do. He started he's much so a Ron Paulian. So he kind of started putting Ron Paul in there. And then he bought me some of my first economic books and he started kind of laying groundwork. So I kind of knew what was going on. And then we had our son, our oldest, and I started looking into just schooling and different ways of getting them involved in different youth programs. And then I started seeing some of the scary stuff that comes from all of that. And I quit my job and started staying home as a stay-at-home parent because I didn't feel like I wanted to be home with him. And I started watching the news more regularly. And my anxiety started to peak. And I was like, what, I don't want to be involved in this. And that's when he said, this is a script. It's played out. It's done this way on purpose. COVID hit. It woke me up big time. We found out what the schools in Washington were going to do to get the kids back in school after doing an entire year of homeschool. I did my son's entire first grade at home on a computer with a teacher. He'd have 6 different classes and he'd have like 20 minutes in between. So I had like 12 different alarms on my phone and we'd have to run in and meet his teacher. And then I'd have to teach him. It was a nightmare. And when they said it was the shot or that, we packed up and moved 3 months later, 1,500 miles away to Nebraska. And that's when I said, you know what, if this is something that's affecting this much of so many people's lives, I have to say something, which is when I registered libertarian and I started pushing the last 4 years now. And now here I am.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how people can meet vaccine skeptics with so much hostility when literally my position is not like, well, I'm not taking it because I know Bill Gates is going to chip me if I get it. I'm like, it's not that at all. It's literally I just don't like this group of people producing and promoting it. And I think they have a bad reputation, so I'm just not going to trust them. It's a restaurant that has given like 1,000 people food poisoning. It's like, maybe if I go, maybe I'll eat good food and it'll make me healthy, but I just don't like what they've done so far. And oh, they're trying to lobby so they don't have to compensate you if you get food poisoning from the restaurant. Oh gosh, you know what? I'm just not going to take that risk. I wish you guys luck though. As if that is so crazy just to say, you know what? I don't like their reputation as of now. Why don't you develop a better reputation and maybe tomorrow I'll change my mind? It's this concept of statism that gets people in the worldview of saying, when I say something, I promote it, the politicians accept it, and then it's enforced on everyone. When they don't get that last step, they feel like you have stolen from them. It's like, well, I just clearly told you that you should be going to college. What do you mean you're not going? This is how you get an education. What do you mean you don't want to chip in for healthcare or the state schooling system, or you think property taxes are theft? I've said it to you very clearly now. I'm doing this for you. I'm just trying to help you. The amount of entitlement inevitably not only puts obligations on total strangers, which is just psychopathic, but it even is bad for the person promoting the ideas because they don't really try that hard. Like anytime there's a, do you guys have Red for Ed in Nebraska? This
No.
is when a lot of supporters of the state schooling system all get together, wear the color red, and then march in hopes of demanding an increase in school funding. They never brag about these, whether it's statistics or anything related to. They're like, you know how everyone's brilliant and the population can't get fooled by politicians? That's because of us. They never say anything like that. They're just like, our kids can barely read. They don't know, basic history or basic science or basic math. And I'm like, and this is after a drastic increase in K through 12 spending since 1960, even when you adjust for inflation. Real dollars, I believe the numbers that I came across, that I have in my book, Domestic Imperialism, something like 200% adjusted for inflation they've spent on per student spending at the federal and local level. These kids should be brilliant. And then during COVID, when parents got to see what the teachers were teaching, then it was like, "Oh my gosh, no wonder everyone started having ADD and ADHD and all this other fake nonsense." It's like, "No, I don't have a disease, you're just really boring." I could sit through and read Kissinger's book on diplomacy, a guy I hate, but it's interesting. I can sit down and read that 4 hours straight. How come I can't focus on you? It's like a comedian who doesn't get people to laugh and says, "These people have a mental disorder that doesn't allow them to laugh." It's not that I'm not funny. That can't be, don't even bring that up. You need to be medicated. That's the only explanation. Maybe you're just boring as hell. Have you seen any examples of libertarianism improving like your everyday life, how you see relationships, how you view the world?
Yes, I think, so obviously my kids are getting older, so that's part of it too, but I think that, I have treated parenting differently, because one of the things I think a lot of parents don't remember, and something that I try to remind myself that I think is very libertarian, is they're their own person. So I try to give them respect in the sense that I know they're, 8 and 11, so they're not exactly fully formed. They don't know everything about the world, but I try to give them the respect and the time to think through things, to process them, to feel what they need to. And I think that's a very libertarian thing. And I wasn't raised that way. Most of my friends weren't raised that way. Your parents are your elders, you respect them. And my kids know that and understand that. But I harbor well, for example, my oldest got offered the chance to be on a baseball team that travels. And it's a lot of traveling. And it's something you're going to have the passion for. And I didn't just make the call. I sat down and I said, here's the facts. I want you to think about it, because whether you're 11 or not, this is your life. And I think that's probably something I learned being in the libertarian field, is the fact that everybody has their own ability to make those decisions. And if I take away those critical thinking now, it's going to be harder later. So I personally think that's something I learned, because I don't want to say I wouldn't have, because that kind of discredits my own growth, but I'm not sure I would have seen it the same way or processed it that way without the path I had taken when they were babies, learning more about that sort of thing. I've never been a follower. I got kicked out of Sunday school for asking questions. It's not like it was not in me already. I just don't think I would have seen it the same, because I hadn't done all the personal research into the space, the autonomy, the fact that it's valid that I don't see it the same way as everybody else, and that's fine. And I think that helped me be a stronger advocate and an ear for my kids, because they feel comfortable enough to say, I don't want to travel because it's going to cost me boxing. It's going to cost, and he's able to critically think through that at 11, because I've given him the respect and space to do so. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
The longer that I do this research, look into the libertarian and voluntarist philosophy, the less I see it as. Of course, I think the world, every person has an obligation to respect the self ownership principle and the non aggression principle. However, as far away as that may seem, first of all, that's not just something that we have. Every other philosophy is saying, like, well, in the future, we're doing this now, but we'd like to grow in the future. So it's not just us living in like our fantasy land. Every other philosophy has a fantasy land and a way to get there. So it's not unique to us. But the more I appreciate these concepts being able to, show themselves in my everyday life. So what you had said about the baseball team, the concept of weighing benefits and costs. This is something the average adult does not do when it comes to politics. They will literally only list the costs or only list the benefits and say, this is a bad thing, there are costs. This is a good thing, there are benefits. Weighing both of those, especially when you're talking to a kid, I would think has to at least prime them to decrease the likelihood that they'll get manipulated by blatant propaganda from whether it's parents, whether it's teachers, whether it's friends or associates, bosses that they work with. Just that concept of being able to weigh costs and benefits in the short run and in the long run, you're getting a child to get into what Henry Hazlitt called the economic way of thinking. So I see that as really beneficial. I also see the self ownership principle as me going up to every person and saying, I am not entitled to 1 penny of what you've justly acquired, nor am I entitled to 1 second of your time. So, how do I create value in exchange for your money or time? I think libertarianism has made me a better person. I know a lot of heavy statists, whether they're on the right or left, it tends to be something on the left, where they feel so entitled to your time. I remember arguing with a family member, and he's okay. Hold on, let me try to get this story out without getting specific. Okay, so he got
I know, I'm the
per,
same. Like, whew.
person A said, person B never gives me any of their time. Much as I try for it, person B doesn't give me any of their time. And frankly, it's very rude, and I'm getting sick of it. So I say to person A, is there anything you do when you're around person B to create the incentive to want to be around you? Do you have things planned? Do you have topics to discuss? What are some of the things that you try to do to make yourself valuable so person B will want to spend their scarce time on earth with you instead of being alone, sleeping, reading, spending time with someone else? To which person A actually stopped and thought for like 3 or 4 seconds, which is more than person A will usually do. And he looks at me and goes, I don't think I should have to do that. I think person B should want to spend time with me just because I'm me. And I go, oh, that's why we disagree about 10,000 things, because we really
Things.
only disagree with one foundational thing, which leads to a disagreement in every other aspect of life. So that to me is a great benefit that we're able to get. And we don't have to say, well, this will only be beneficial if the entire world is anarcho capitalist within 20 years. That is just so difficult to, to obtain that I'm always trying to find things in my everyday life. Another thing that I do is I try to engage in persuasion as much as possible for basically anything I want. So I feel totally justified in having real opinions about what people should say, frankly, what people should wear, or how buildings should look, how houses should, perform, because I'm so how houses should appear, because I'm very aware of the power of persuasion, and just invoking a little guilt can incentivize a person to change their behavior. The only reason I was able to lose 110 pounds is not because Michelle Obama passed a law. It's because someone literally persuaded me into doing it. So once I see it's like, okay, I can't use violence or threats thereof. What can I do to get this person to change for what I think is the better? And I'm totally open to any criticism. I have no problem having a discussion with a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness who is like, you are going to burn in hell for eternity. I have no problem asking what their evidence or reasoning is, and I'm totally open to it. Other statists are like, don't push that on me. I'm like, you want to cage me for not chipping into bullshit. What do you mean, don't push it on you? It's completely ridiculous. Any other aspects of your everyday life or relationships in general, which you think libertarianism has helped with?
A little bit of strength. I had a lot of friends and family who pushed a lot of their beliefs and their things on me, and I just kind of kept quiet because I didn't know enough, or I didn't feel like I didn't fit with red or blue. I didn't fit that profile, and I didn't for a while. And so I just was like, clearly politics just isn't for me. well, a lot of people just kind of back out and think, well, it's not my issue. I don't want to be involved. It sucks. Well, that doesn't solve anything. And I think that once I found that you didn't have to be red or blue, you don't even have to be gold. Like, you don't have, I'm not going to sit here and be like, you have to be a libertarian. That defeats the entire purpose of what the party should stand for. Ideally, yeah, we'd all be libertarians. And yeah, we would be in an anarcho capital society. We'd all be happy and everything would be fine. 100%. That's just not where we're at. So I think it's given me a little bit of power in understanding that I'm not alone in that feeling. None of us are. And we don't have to live inside of that game. We don't have to let our family members tell us we're a danger to everyone else because we don't fall into that line. I got that a lot. You're a danger. You're putting everyone else's life at risk because of the decisions you're making. And it's like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. That was the biggest one I got from all sides. Red, blue, didn't matter. I have family members on both. I have friends on both. And I was always a risk to their safety and to the safety of everyone around me. So having that sort of arguments have to come forward has given me a little bit more of a strength in myself, understanding that I'm not alone in this. I'm not crazy, conspiracy, kooky head. There's a lot of us that see this bullshit for what it is. And we can stand and talk about it together. So I'd say that too.
Well, I love the concept of we are risking their health and
Lies,
well-being.
right?
It's like, okay, first of all, outside of what Tony Fauci tells you to do, walk me through all the things you do to make sure you're in tip-top shape. Okay, look, there's a
Yeah,
bit of an
right.
epidemic because not enough people know about the keto and carnivore diet, which completely saved my life. Um, it's just this, oh gosh, I swear to God, I had an angle on this that I was very furious about and then just forgot. It's like,
Well,
okay. So when people would say things like, "You're putting us at risk," or initially it was, "Do whatever you want, you're gonna die." And when we said, "Okay," they were like, "Okay, we actually are going to reapproach this. You're threatening me right now. I get the
yeah,
shot that saves my life, and you're threatening me by not getting the same shot." It's like, okay, for 10, maybe 15 years, you have told me there's really one problem in the world, and it's, bigots like you. It's these climate skeptics and these climate deniers. It's these people who don't care about education like you. It's people who don't want to give people health care just like you. It's people who don't want to regulate the entire economy from Washington, D.C. You are just such a big burden and a problem on society. And I go, well, you know what then? I want you to let me die. I'm not going to get this
yeah,
shot. I want you to let me and all the rest of us who believe all those things you just listed, I want you to let us die. You would say that you don't have the right to kill us, but we're choosing to die by not getting this shot and by not wearing a mask and by not staying inside for years on end until Tony
yeah,
Fauci gives us the green light to go outside. So you're going to basically have all the power you've ever wanted. We're most the vast majority of us are going to die from COVID-19 since we're not taking the precautions you're telling us about. And then you'll have all the power in the world. You'll never have to even debate with us about schooling or healthcare or climate change or any of the other nonsense. You'll get all the DEI programs. We'll all be dead and the world will be yours. So please let me die.
yeah.
And they're like, no, I need to save you. I need something to fight against. I need the bigotry that you bring into the world that I tell you is the worst thing on the planet. I need to keep you alive. It's like, what? I'm
I,
offering to kill myself by
right.
not taking this
I
shot.
won't be here.
You're saving the world. There's not going to be terrible me around. You've said I was terrible for 20 years. I'm telling you, I want to die. I want to give you the planet. And you guys are like, no, we're gonna save your life against your will. I'm like, okay, well, you're
Pure
probably a little more
spite.
insecure. Yeah.
Pure spite will keep you alive at this point. You cannot die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Any
that was
other lessons from COVID, dealing with Democrats, dealing with neocons, lessons from politics? If you want to get into lessons from the Libertarian Party, which you have worked with, which is very separate from the Libertarian Institute.
yes.
What
Yeah.
what would you like to get into about your story?
See, I think living in Washington really showed me that I will never be able to be a contemporary Democrat. It's unreal the herd mentality up there. And anyone that's like, well, I live in this part of Washington, that's not the case. Okay, but the populace is in the area that is all screwed up and they control the rest. So it's just going to continue to spread and get bad until something crashes. And I think that it's sad because the places that they gravitate to are the places that are the easiest to live with the best and most abundant resources. And they're always beautiful because they're easy and beautiful. Nobody wants to live where it gets negative 45. That's not easy. I know, I do it in the wintertime. It's not easy. But you know what? There's a lot of people out here that are hardworking and kind and willing to put the time in, and they go, yeah, this sucks. But they don't live the easy life, which makes them a lot stronger, a lot of a more stand-up person. So I think that harboring yourself in these areas and sitting in an echo chamber in the middle of Seattle doesn't show growth. It just shows that you are willing to stagnate and continue to suck resources from everyone else and be blatantly oblivious to the damage you're doing. So living in Washington for 20 years was a wonderful thing, and it also opened my eyes to just the disgusting nature that is statism. Like it did. So I would thank the Democrat Party for waking me up to the nastiness, and now it's time to fix it. So that would be that, and yeah, that'd be pretty much it. Libertarian stuff is so crazy right now. Anybody that's involved in that knows, and it's not
All
part
right.
of the institute, you know.
All right. Yes. Yes. Oh, say it again a little louder, please. So
This is my
I have,
safe haven from that.
yeah, I have seen so many people go for swimming with the tide instead of swimming against it. And I know that it feels good momentarily, but it makes you so much weaker in the long run. There are kids who go through high school and then go to a university. I don't know the origin of the word university, but it seems like I'm going to a place where it's a universe in a city. I'm learning about the universe. I'm broadening my horizons. Well, when you go to these places, they're Maoist hellholes, more or less. The ones that I went to, at least. And I'm in Arizona, which is a purple. At the time, it was more of a red state, but it's more of a purple state. And it was really bad in the college campuses. People don't randomly go to college. It's a selection process, and they tend to be, but very heavily focused on left wing ideas. So you could literally go 4 years thinking you're learning about the universe, but
Universe.
never come across a confrontational opinion. So, and this can even happen in certain sections. So, Dave and I were talking yesterday about how it almost appears as though Konstantin Kisin has never come across an alternative point of view with regard to the Second World War. That seems extremely plausible. You can spend a large amount of time based on the people who you choose to surround yourself with, never hearing an alternative opinion, which might feel kind of good. We're all on the same page, but it makes you so weak intellectually that you literally get anxiety whenever you come across someone who just makes a totally reasonable statement. I'm like, yeah, I think schools should kind of be like me and my friends. Like we're in the voluntary sector. We could lose our jobs tomorrow. You could stop funding the things that I do. No one could buy my book. No one could employ me. That's kind of scary, but it keeps me on my toes. I have other options. I try to improve myself. I try to get on the job training skills. So it's scary, but I'm able to create value in exchange. They don't even consider that. They associate school choice, being able to choose which school to go to. You still have to fund the schooling system. They associate that with abolishing funding for government schools because they're so insecure. They know that if people are given a choice, that means
They
they will
won't
choose to
choose it.
leave them. Yeah, it's just as psychotic as thinking like, well, you know what? I think women should be assigned to me because I just don't think I could get a wife in the voluntary market, and I'm really helping them out too, so it's totally fine. If you believe in woman choice, then that means you want me to die alone. That is the mindset of someone who says you believe in school choice. That means you don't want anyone to attend my school. It's like that's just you explaining how psychotically insecure you are about the service you are providing. So, yeah, that was great to get your side of that story. We've been going 40 minutes. That
I know. It
that
didn't even
that
feel
was
like it
good.
though.
All right. Any questions for me? You know that you mentioned that you've been watching Scott and I for some time. What do you have for me?
Well, I have one that I've been thinking about, and I think it really speaks to kind of the institute thing. What are you reading right now? Like, of all the things, I feel like what you're working on always kind of ends up filtering into your work as well. So I'm curious, what are you currently reading? And are you a one book person, or do you read multiple books at a time?
No,
I already know the
I'm not loyal. I have no loyalty. Okay. Right now I'm reading Henry Kissinger's book, Diplomacy. This is a book he published in 1994, which summarizes a great deal of his other books. He has been writing about, I want to say 40 years before this. His book, Harvard thesis, Nuclear Weapons and Foreign Policy. I'm sorry. His Harvard thesis was on the Treaty of Vienna, the Congress of Vienna in 1815, I want to say. He's been writing for a very long time, but this book really summarizes a lot of it. He has a section on Richard Nixon going to China. The reason I wanted to read this now is we have a president who I am very happy that he has said, yeah, we need to talk to Putin and negotiate a ceasefire in Ukraine. That was very surprising, and he ran on that. And then once he was elected, he went as far as to say, one of the meetings I want to have is with President Xi of China and President Putin of Russia, and say, we could be cutting our military budgets in half. That was shocking that that came from a Republican president. So,
Republican. Yeah.
look, I am very appreciative of that. So I wanted to get Kissinger's point of view. I'm also reading Nixon's memoirs. It's 1,000 pages, but I'm going to the section where he talks about how they got someone in Pakistan to connect them with someone in China who was sending like they have these politicians like have to flirt with each other. Like they
I was
never
going to
said,
say,
"Hey, we'd love to meet with you. We'd love to avoid a nuclear exchange. Let's get on the same page." It's always like there is interest in building a potential bridge between the differences we have. And we know you have border disputes with the Soviets and everything. So being able to, get in on the ground level and see just what Nixon at least wants the readers of his memoirs to know. I get such a kick out of this. It takes me a long time to read these because I'm so interested. I'll read a paragraph and then just stop and go, oh my gosh, that was amazing. When Nixon is retelling the story of how he found out about the Watergate break-in and how he was like, "Well, it looks really bad on us, but I don't even know why someone would want to, wiretap the headquarters of the Democratic National Convention. It seems really bizarre, but what I think we can do is take the Cuban angle because a number of the, people who broke in were Cuban. We could say that they were anti-communist. They escaped Cuba because they hated communism and feared that George McGovern would bring communism to America. So this was just some Cuban operation. This is nothing on us. He seemed very insecure about that. So his next option was to basically say, you know what? Let's just pin it all on G. Gordon Liddy. This could stop
it's his
the
fault.
depositions from taking place. We won't have to get deposed. And Nixon ended up winning this election. I want to say like 49 states he won after this, and then ended up resigning. But yeah, just getting that one-on-one the primary source material for what his explanation is, what his point of view is. And then, of course, Kissinger's attempt to weaken the Soviet Union by becoming friends with China and, capitalizing on the Sino-Soviet split. That was interesting. And then this is another juicy one. It's called Argument Without End by Robert McNamara. So, McNamara, Secretary of Defense in the Vietnam War. He kept statistics during the Second World War. He was later president of the World Bank. This is a guy who, knows where the bodies are buried, so to speak. He gets together with the generals of the NVA. I want to say it's the NVA, the Northern Vietnamese Army. The Viet Cong, those communists were in South Vietnam. So he meets with the general of Hanoi in the 1990s. He reaches out to them and says, this was the Vietnam struggle was a complete tragedy. Let's meet 30 years later. Let's meet now and go over what happened and see what lessons can be learned. And this book, Argument Without End, is the exchanges between these guys when they met. So
Oh man, I should
his
write that down.
it,
I
it,
I
it is
took a
so
Vietnam
interesting.
War class, so yeah. pen.
It's very, very long, and you know what? When you say stuff like that, it makes me want to just expedite the process of getting material out on it because a lot of it can be summarized, and sometimes you'll read 30 pages with not much, but then one page will be really juicy. So he's talking to the head of the NVA, and this guy says to him, "There's translators and everything." He says, "Well, we were fighting against you, the American imperialists. We fought against that. We suffered under Japanese occupation. We suffered under French occupation. You were just the third in line. We had fallen for this before. You're not here to help us. You're not here to build a Tennessee Valley Authority, as Lyndon Johnson said. You're just imperialists like everyone else." To which McNamara was saying, "That completely caught me off guard. That was never our intention. We saw this conflict as an attempt to restrict the spread of Bolshevism into other lands. So this was part of our containment policy." So this is what you and I spoke about some time ago. The reason McNamara said the number one lesson that he learned was to empathize with your enemy. He says, "We empathize with the Soviets. That's why we were able to de-escalate the Cuban Missile Crisis of 62. We did not know the Vietnamese well enough to empathize with them. That's why Vietnam turned into the catastrophe that it did." There was there was one other thing. When it comes to the Gulf of Tonkin incident, McNamara said, "Well, it turns out there was no attack on August 4th of 1964. Gulf of Tonkin resolution passed the House 416 votes to 0, passed the Senate 88 votes to 2. All right. Was there an attack?" And the other general says, "No, we didn't order an attack." And the attack that did happen on August 2nd, 2 days before, was just some member of the military going rogue. This apparently, according to McNamara, was more significant than whether or not an attack happened. He said because it wasn't an attack that came as a result of orders from Hanoi, the capital of Vietnam, then this completely changes everything. I mean, it's different if some if some Russian immigrant gets in a fight with someone and kills someone, that's different than if Vladimir Putin sent someone to America to kill that person.
Very.
It's a difference between a declaration of war and a dispute which should be resolved in some sort of hostage negotiation or something. So to see the importance that McNamara put on where the decisions were being made for what happened being almost more important than what actually happened was really interesting. Those are the 2 books I'm reading right now.
If you pick a storybook, what would you pick? Are you a fantasy guy, a mystery guy, or do you just primarily like are you a you ever read just storybooks? Every time I talk to you, it's always like some sort of research. Like I'm reading a
Yes.
book about exorcism. So do you read storybooks ever?
Yes, for
Okay.
my nieces and nephews, I read, story books all the time. I always try to make it Tuttle Twins material. Are
Oh
you
yeah.
familiar with Connor Boyack?
Oh yeah, we
Oh
have
my
them
god.
all. Yeah.
The Miraculous Pencil is my favorite one to read. I love reading, the whatever their version of the law is. There's 12 Rules for Life. And then for the older kids, there's How Not to Suck at Life, which is 89 rules to live life as a teen. There's Beware of Your Bias, Logical Fallacies, Courageous Heroes, Inspiring Entrepreneurs, and True Conspiracies. Okay, that's actually a nonfiction one, as well as the older books I mentioned. But the stories that I read are stories that I really try to have that I can extract a lesson from to
Yeah.
give to my nieces and nephews. I try to propagandize them a little in the right direction, and it does so much more than the hours and hours of boring indoctrination. So, yeah, those are when I read stories. I'm trying to think of I loved reading Stephen King's books when I was younger. His book Different Seasons is that's the one that has The Shawshank Redemption and The Body, which was later oh my god, Stand By Me? What was the name of the what later became a movie about boys going into the woods and finding a body or something. So I liked his books, Pet Cemetery and stuff, but I am just addicted to the nonfiction drug right now, and that's why the vast majority of these are nonfiction.
Yeah, I loved to read as a kid. I read lots and lots of stuff. I was always into fantasy stuff. Like I lost 2 bookcases, which was a travesty when we moved from Washington. Yeah, so my stuff is triple stacked and double stacked and shoved in all the corners. So I love to read, and then I had kids and it became more difficult. So now on the other side, picking up time, it's all been political researching books, and ancient civilizations is one of my most personal favorite like offshoot things to study. Like I like to see the stuff from way, way back. We're not talking just recent history. I want to know the really old ancient stuff before any of the Egyptians and things like that. So that's a personal favorite. So I have a lot of that reading too. But I was curious because we talk through the chats and on occasion here and stuff like that. So I was curious what kind of books you would pick for just leisure reading, which makes sense, Tuttle Twins and things like that. And I figured Stephen King, I didn't see you reading something that didn't have an analytical brain side to it. It's the impression I get from you. You always seem to be quite on mentally. So I was curious what
Yeah.
you do to relax when it comes to those things.
Oh, what I do to you know what? I don't do a lot of relaxing
I knew
reading.
it. I was
I love relaxing YouTube though. That's when I can really turn the brain off. When I can just watch like best of Jersey Shore fights. Those are always great to wind down to. There's a show called Perry Caravello Live, which is just this guy. This guy gets so angry at stuff. I get an absolute blast. Or like um, my friends and I will watch just reality TV fights or something like that. My sister and I watched Love Is Blind, and
Oh,
what
I
I
love
love
that
about that,
too.
what
I
I
watched that
love about
too.
that show is it's so fun for my sister and I, who's a little older than me, and we can watch it and like these 1 hour episodes. I swear will take us like 5 hours because we're always
Yeah.
pausing it and talking about. But that is like the great family time that I really enjoy. So, yeah, I don't do leisure reading, but leisure watching, sometimes I gotta turn that iPad off because the time will fly. Trying to think of what was the last thing you saw on, like, Netflix that was really good or enjoyable? I had to watch It Ends With Us just because my grandma's obsessed with the Blake Lively drama, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I want her and I to be able to discuss something together, so I'm gonna watch It Ends With Us, and I think we've been having a conversation about that movie for a month on and off. So, yeah, that's where I get my brain breaks from.
Yeah, I get it. I'm actually watching Love Is Blind too, the new season that's out, because it's funny. It's fun stuff. Like I get the same thing. Reality TV is a fun break because it's not drama that has to necessarily be real. We both, I mean, I can't speak for you. I think you would agree. We both live in a lot of real life drama, and we see a lot of atrocities in the work that we do, and we deal with a lot of real serious stuff. And so sometimes it's fun to watch just like you said, people fight over something silly. Like I want to see these people do really silly crap because I don't want to have to deal with it. I Love Is Blind is fun, and my best friend who lives in Washington watches it. So we'll text each other during like, "What do you think of this guy?" or "This lady's crazy." So it's same. It's a good way to relax. I love that stuff too.
Yeah, it's always
Movies
fun
and
to be like, "All right, if this relationship lasts more than a week, if they go past the honeymoon that they all go on, I will take you out to dinner because there's no way.
right.
I mean, I know they've both said this, but they have such little impulse control that the slightest thing is going to knock them off. So I bet you, and then we will try to keep it entertaining with that. But I love, yes. So Love Is Blind. Jersey Shore was the big show when I was in high school. I remember we would like be up like Tuesday excited, Wednesday excited, and then Thursday night was Jersey Shore night.
Sure.
That was. Did you ever watch The Hills?
Yeah, I did. I watched The Hills. Yeah.
Yes, I remember when it was like the last episode and they zoom out and it looks like this total set. So to find out that so much of it was scripted, maybe
Yeah.
that's why I have trust issues
You're like,
in every
"What?"
other aspect of life because it was so obviously fake. Like there's a scene where Heidi and Spencer are getting in this absolute blowout. Spencer's furious. He slams the car door, and then you watch the additional footage and he waves to the cameraman. Okay, guys, thanks for everything. We'll see you next week. And then he gets
Yeah.
back in the car. I'm like, oh, I've been fooled. Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
That's like when Survivor, when that got cracked for me, because I'm like, oh my God, these people are starving to death. And it's like, yeah, but like off camera, they help each other and they don't actually suffer as much as, and I was like, what? I was like prepared. I was gonna be a great Survivor person. I was gonna go on there, I was gonna be one tough lady. And it's like half of it's not even real. It sucks.
Uh,
Like that was painful.
Are there any comedy shows or comedy movies that you like? It's so funny. My friend and I were just quoting Wedding Crashers the other day when Christopher Walken's like, "Hey Todd, come play football, make your dad proud," and he just goes, "Oh, would that make you love me?" We were cracking up about a movie from I think like 2005 or something. There's
Yeah.
some great comedies that are just so watchable. Every Christmas, I love Elf. What are some comedy shows or movies that you enjoy to, take the edge off?
So what I my one of my favorite movies of all time is Superbad. It's an older one. It just cracks me up. I have a friend who reminds me a lot of like that group of friends, and those antics and stuff bring back a lot of memories from my high school, which kind of is telling about the child I was. But that whole, the strife to get the alcohol and the party, like I remember doing those things, so it hits
Yeah.
home for that. And then Zombieland is probably my favorite movie, top 5 movies of all time. I love a horror comedy because it's just, I don't know, there's something grungy about a horror comedy, like Idle Hands, something like that. TV wise, I watch a lot of Disjointed, which is a movie is a show about stoners in a pot shop. So it's funny and goofy and just completely off the wall because any stereotype you can think of, they have in there. So it's just a silly, stereotypical stoner show that's goofy.
Have you ever
Comedy's
watched
my favorite.
Vanderpump Rules?
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. Well, you're a wealthier woman for having not watched it. I feel totally impoverished, but it's a terrible drug to get addicted to. There were tons of um, really enjoyable moments where you could be watching with friends and pause it and literally talk about like legitimate sources of frustration between the parties. But I was old enough at the time where I'm like, all right, let's say it's all fake. Let's say it's not. We can still extract like a lesson from this and get to know each other better through the stories that other people are telling. So I remember liking Vanderpump Rules a lot. This was a long time ago. But yeah, that's the main thing that I do to relax.
Yeah. Like I said, I feel like we always have so much facts and details. When we get together, we talk so much about what we need to get done.
Yeah.
So it's fun to get to like chat, about just life stuff. Like what do you do to relax? What's your favorite? What are you reading? Those sorts of things are important, I think, for everybody to get to know each other more, and not just you and I, but everybody that puts time and effort into supporting the Institute. I think that's one of the things that helps everybody grow, is that personal connection, at least for me anyways. That's one of my things that I like. So yeah, my questions are probably pretty crazy like that, but movies and books and TV and stuff, I think music specifically really speak to each other's souls. So I like that
Okay.
kind of
Well,
stuff.
what are your favorite bands?
That, yeah, I mean, I have a whole music sleeve, but Avenged Sevenfold, until their most recent CD, where I'm worried what path they're heading down. I'm hoping it was just a fun artsy thing. Being a musician, I know what happens, but Avenged Sevenfold, Alice Cooper, I've seen him a couple times, met him. He's really cool. My boys and I have gone to Slipknot. I just got back from a Disturbed concert last week. So a
Yeah.
lot of metal and rock, but then I also have seen like ICP and Twisted, and um I classically trained on saxophone, so I've gone to different orchestra things, and I've been in plays, and I music of all types. But if I'm gonna go and to a show, it's most likely gonna be rap or rock.
How did you what year did you see Slipknot? Because I've seen them on gosh, I forget the name of their last album, but I went to the Is Gone, All Hope Is
Yeah,
Lost, All Hope Is Gone tour. It was awesome, and they stayed true to playing, like, the first 5 songs off their first album. They played, like, Sick, Eyeless, Wait and Bleed, all that stuff. I loved the Slipknot show,
yeah.
except when these assholes started a fire in the lawn, and then Corey Taylor had to walk off stage. But to Corey Taylor's credit, they still came out afterwards. But they were so good at playing the stuff that people love. Whereas Bruce Springsteen, Oh, I want reparations from him and the E Street Band. They just played the new Horrible album. You
Yeah,
have never s I remember it was like 4 or 5 songs in a row of just stuff off this new record, which is not even that good, and by, like, the 6th song, you just saw waves of people get up
people.
to leave, either to walk around or to actually exit. They're like, "This is a complete waste of time." So, I love the Slipknot shows. Dave Matthews and My Chemical Romance have to be my 2 favorites. I will just never get sick of the Three Cheers album from My Chemical
I
Romance or
love that
the
album.
Black Parade. Yeah, I
Yes.
think Black Parade is my favorite, and then Dave Matthews Before These Crowded Streets, just an excellent album. Those are the ones. What has been your favorite live show? I think my favorite live show
Oof.
might have been Dave Matthews at Citi Field in New York. It was just wild to see. I went with my aunt. I was real young at the time, like 17. She went with me, and she didn't know any Dave Matthews songs, and she loved it. It was so good. So, oh, and Zach Brown opened for them, and Zach Brown was a small band at the time. So it was a great show to see. If I had to pick one, I would say it was that Dave Matthews concert, but Bruno Mars is also very impressive live. My mom was like, "All right, for my birthday, let's go to Bruno Mars," and I'm like, "All right, you buy the tickets, and my gift to you is attending because I don't like Bruno Mars." I left that show. This guy is so talented. He is such a great performer that um, I really like him as well. Who were your favorite shows?
Ooh, well, I've seen close to 100 different concerts, so that's a hard one. If I were to pick one that was like really impactful for me, I would say that the first time I ever was in a pit. So I had seen concerts in the seat, but the first time I was able to actually be in the pit in general admission was really big for me, and that was Corn, and it was Return of the Dread. So it was like Corn and Rob Zombie, and it was at White River Amphitheater, so it was a festival. So Avenged Sevenfold and Disturbed and Corn and Rob Zombie, and In This Moment were all playing that day. So for me, that's huge because it was my first pit, and it had like a laundry list of my favorite type of bands. So it was huge. But then as far as just like super fun, I didn't expect it to be that way at all. I took my husband to see a bunch of his favorite bands, and Guar was opening for them, and I know very little of their music. I'd heard a few songs. I knew the general idea of who they were, but by the time I left, I over the moon. That was one of the funnest concerts I have ever been to because they're fun and there's this whole show to it. And I'm one of those people that'll get down in the mud. I don't care. I like to do those things. And so they're spraying you with food coloring the whole concert. And I was in heaven. I have pictures where my teeth are dyed because I was smiling so big. And I it
Yeah.
soaked all the way through to my skin, so, like, all of my bra, my underwear, my socks are all still dyed, and I kept them all. I washed them, they're dyed, and I put them in a little bag and wrote "Guar" across them because 'cause they're ruined, but you can't get rid of something like that, so my shoes from the concert are dyed. It was one of those ones where I bought tickets for my husband to see Cold Chamber later that day, and Mudvayne was playing. Like, it was a bunch of bands that he was super excited for, and I was like, "Happy birthday, I'm gonna take you to this," and then I left, and I was like, "Guar was amazing." That was so much fun because it was a whole big thing to it. It wasn't just the music, and I didn't go because I knew their music. I went to support and to see the other bands. So I left excited about something new, which I think is one of the fun things about a concert. Like you and Bruno Mars, you went in with zero expectations and you left with the
Yeah,
newfound respect for his talent, at least. So I'd have to put
absolutely.
more up there.
Well, we are at an hour already. Everyone, check out libertarianinstitute.org/donate. Check out some of our books. Check out any of the free material on there. Rachel Nelson, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for doing this with me, Keith. I hope we can do it again soon.
Of course.